"Where's my boat?" I said it out loud before I even understood what I was looking at. The trailer hitch behind my garage was empty. The 2x4s I'd bolted under the hull to keep her steady were still there, pressed into the gravel, shaped like a ghost of the thing I'd spent 12 years saving for and 8 months restoring with my own 2 hands. The morning was cold and gray and completely still, and I stood there in my robe like a man who just watched the floor disappear beneath him. Then my daughter walked out the back door. She had her car keys in her hand and her coat already on, like she'd been waiting for me to notice. I looked at her, she looked at me. "Dad," she said, "I need to tell you something." I already knew. Somehow, before she said a single word, I already knew. "I sold the boat," she said. "Kevin needed the capital. We didn't have another option." I didn't shout. I didn't move. I just stood there in the cold with my hands at my sides, staring at the empty hitch, and felt something in my chest go very quiet in a way that had nothing to do with calm. My name is Frank Calloway. I'm 68 years old. For 31 years, I worked as a fire inspector for the city of Knoxville, Tennessee. I know how to walk into a burning building and tell you exactly where it started and why. What I could not have told you that morning, standing in my own backyard, was how a woman I raised to know right from wrong could look me straight in the face and say what she just said without flinching. My wife Carol died of pancreatic cancer 4 years ago, 14 weeks from diagnosis to the end. The doctors called it aggressive, like that word was enough to explain how a person who was planting tomatoes on a Tuesday morning could be gone before the first frost. Carol was 62 years old. She had a laugh that filled every room she walked into, and a habit of leaving little handwritten notes tucked inside my jacket pockets when I wasn't looking. I still find them sometimes, in coats I haven't worn in a season. I've stopped being surprised and started being grateful. Before she got sick, we used to sit out on the back porch in the evenings and talk about the water. We both grew up near rivers. Carol near the Holston, me near the Cumberland. There's something about moving water that slows a person down in exactly the right way. We always said that when I retired, we were going to spend a summer on a houseboat, not some rented thing. Something I built myself, or close to it. Something we could take down the Tennessee River and just disappear into for a while. Retirement came. Carol didn't make it there with me. For a long time afterward, I didn't touch the savings account we'd kept for the trip. It felt wrong to spend it on anything else. It sat there for almost 2 years while I figured out who I was without her. Then one spring morning, I drove past a marina outside Lenoir City, and sitting in the lot behind a chain-link fence was a 1,987 Chris Craft with a hull that needed everything and an engine that needed more. I pulled over. I got out. I put my hand on the bow. I bought her that afternoon. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. My daughter Renata said, "Daddy, that thing is a wreck." She wasn't wrong. But she also didn't understand that a wreck is just a promise that hasn't been kept yet. I spent 8 months in that garage. New planking, new electrical, 2 rebuilt fuel tanks, a mahogany trim I sanded by hand until my arms ached. Carol's favorite color was sage green, so I painted the interior panels sage green. I kept her old fishing hat on the hook beside the cabin door. I framed a photograph of the 2 of us from our first anniversary trip to Lake Cumberland and bolted it to the console so she'd be looking out the windshield the same direction I was. The day I finally set her in the water and the hull stayed dry, I sat in the captain's chair for a long time without going anywhere, just sat there. That was enough. I kept the boat at my house on the trailer because I wasn't ready to trust her to a slip yet. I wanted her close. My neighbor Dale used to come over on weekend mornings and we'd drink coffee in lawn chairs beside the hull and argue about which stretch of the river was best for crappie. Those were good mornings. 3 weeks ago, I drove up to Gatlinburg for a long weekend. My old station crew does an annual reunion every October, the ones of us still living within driving distance. I gave Renata my spare key and asked her to water the tomato plants I'd started in the garage and keep an eye on things. She said, "Of course, Daddy, have fun." She hugged me at the door. I had no reason to think twice about any of it. That's the part that still catches me sideways when I let myself think about it. I came home on a Sunday afternoon. The sky was that particular shade of Tennessee October blue that doesn't last long enough. I pulled into my driveway feeling rested for the first time in months. Then I looked behind the garage, and my brain just stopped. The trailer was there. The 2x4s were still set in the gravel. The boat was gone. I walked around the trailer twice. I checked the side yard. I checked the street. I told myself I'd moved it before I left. I hadn't. The panic that came up my spine wasn't fast, it was slow and cold, like water rising. I called Renata. She answered on the second ring. "Where's the boat?" I asked. A silence, long enough to answer the question before she did. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. She showed up with her husband, Kevin. He hung back near their car while she walked over to me. Kevin builds custom kitchen cabinetry. They've been married 7 years. He's always seemed like a decent man. I want to be fair about that, even now. "Daddy," she started. "Tell me," I said. She explained it in the careful way people explain things when they've been rehearsing. Kevin's business had a slow year. A commercial contract fell through in August. They needed $45,000 to cover payroll and equipment costs through the spring, or he'd have to let 2 of his 3 employees go. They'd tried the bank. The bank said no. They'd asked her brother Raymond, and he'd said he didn't have it, which is true. They'd been sitting on the problem for 6 weeks, and then one night Kevin said, "What if we sold your dad's boat?" And Renata said she'd held out for 2 weeks before she decided it was the right call. "You decided," I said. "We were desperate," she said. "That's not what I asked you." Kevin started to say something from across the yard. I looked at him and he stopped. "You had a key to this property," I said to Renata. "You used it to take something that wasn't yours and sell it to someone else without asking me." "Daddy, you weren't even using it." I'd heard that line before. I've heard it from people who take what they want from someone else and call it practicality. I've seen the wreckage it leaves. "I haven't used my wedding ring in 4 years, I said. "Go ahead and sell that too." She looked like I'd slapped her. Kevin took a step forward. I turned and walked inside and locked the door. I sat at my kitchen table for the rest of the afternoon without turning on a light. The sun moved across the floor. Carol's photograph on the refrigerator was smiling at me the way she always did, like she knew something was coming that I didn't. I talked to her sometimes when the house got too quiet. I know how that sounds. I don't particularly care. "She sold the boat," I told the photograph. Carol just kept smiling. Around 5 o'clock, I called my insurance agent. She listened carefully and told me that because Renata had been given authorized access to the property, the matter was likely civil rather than criminal, similar to a property dispute. She recommended an attorney. Then I called the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office anyway. The deputy I spoke to was patient and thorough. He told me exactly what my insurance agent had told me, only in more legal language. He said that if the boat title was in my name alone, and there was evidence of a forged or unauthorized signature on any bill of sale, the picture could change considerably. I hadn't thought about the title. I went to my filing cabinet and checked. Sure enough, the title to the Chris Craft was registered solely in my name. Carol's and mine, originally, transferred to me after she passed. There was no way Renata's name appeared on a legitimate bill of sale. Either the Marina had accepted something irregular, or something had been forged, or both. I sat with that for a while. Then my phone rang. The number on the screen showed a marina I'd never heard of, Riverside Marine Sales, over in Vonore. I almost let it go. I answered instead. "Is this Frank Calloway?" a woman's voice asked. Young, professional, a little nervous underneath the professional. "It is," I said. "Mr. Calloway, my name is Brianna Walsh. I'm the operations manager at Riverside Marine. I'm calling about a 1,987 Chris Craft that was brought in for consignment sale 3 days ago." A pause. "We've encountered a situation, and I think you need to come in." My throat tightened. "What kind of situation?" "Our inspection technician found something inside the boat during our standard pre-sale survey," she said. "Before we go any further, I think you should see it for yourself." "What did you find?" I asked. "There's a compartment," she said, "under the forward bench. Inside there are some personal items. Mr. Calloway, I don't think these were supposed to be there. I think someone put them there on purpose." I didn't speak for a moment. "We also ran the title," she added carefully. "And there's a problem. The drive to Vonore takes about 40 minutes from my house. I don't remember most of it. I remember the radio being on and then being off, and not remembering turning it off. I remember the water coming into view past the tree line, silver in the late afternoon light. I remember thinking about Carol and what she would say, which was probably something practical and a little funny and exactly right. Brianna met me in the parking lot. She was younger than her voice suggested, maybe 35, wearing a Marina polo shirt and an expression that had been carefully arranged into professional sympathy. She walked me through the service building without much small talk, which I appreciated. The Chris Craft was sitting in a covered slip, still out of the water, lifted on the service cradle. Even under the fluorescent shop lights, she was beautiful. 8 months of work. I put my hand on the hull the same way I had in that lot in Lenoir City, back when she was still a wreck, still a promise. She's in good shape, one of the mechanics said from somewhere behind me. An older man, heavy-set, with the kind of forearms that come from 30 years of real work. Whoever restored this boat knew what they were doing. That was me, I said. He nodded like he'd suspected as much. Old Chris Crafts don't lie, he said. You can tell when somebody loved what they were working on. I thanked him. Brianna led me up into the cabin. The mechanic came with us. Carol's fishing hat was still on the hook beside the door. Our anniversary photograph was still on the console. Renata hadn't taken any of it. Maybe she hadn't looked. Maybe she'd looked and not understood what she was seeing. I'm not sure which one is worse. Here, Brianna said, and nodded to the mechanic. He crouched beside the forward bench seat, lifted the cushion, and pressed along the interior hull wall until something gave with a soft click. A panel swung inward, a narrow storage space, maybe 8 inches deep, running the width of the bench. It had been there the whole time. I'd sanded and varnished every inch of that bench and never known. We almost missed it, the mechanic said. The inspection hammer sounded hollow. Took us a few minutes to find the release. Inside the compartment was a waterproof zip bag. Inside the bag were 4 items. A small leather journal. A bundle of handwritten recipe cards tied with kitchen twine. A photograph I thought I had lost 2 years ago, Carol and me on the Cumberland, the summer before she got sick, both of us laughing at something the camera had missed. And underneath everything, a sealed envelope. My name was on the front in Carol's handwriting. I have had some hard moments in my life. I want to be honest about that. I've walked into buildings that were still burning. I've told families things that couldn't be taken back. I have buried my wife. But standing in that boat cabin holding an envelope I'd never seen before, in Carol's handwriting, sealed with a sticker that had a small green hummingbird on it, because that was just who she was, I had to put one hand against the wall to stay upright. Take whatever time you need, Brianna said quietly. She and the mechanic stepped outside without another word. I sat down on the bench above the compartment Carol had apparently known about, and I had not. I opened the journal first. Her handwriting filled every page. River towns, anchorages, small state parks with boat launches, restaurant names with little stars drawn next to her favorites before she'd ever visited them. Notes in the margins: Frank would want to fish here for at least 2 days. Plan accordingly. Sunrise faces east. Set the alarm. There's a pie shop in Decatur, Alabama, that Raymond told me about. Non-negotiable stop. She'd been planning this trip for years, before the diagnosis, maybe long before. She'd bought the journal at some point and started filling it in, and she'd never mentioned it, and when she got sick she must have known she wasn't going to make it, and she'd hidden it inside a boat I didn't buy until 2 years after she died, in a compartment she'd apparently known was there from the previous owner. I stopped reading 3 times before I got through it. Each time, I sat very still and waited for the weight to settle before I kept going. The recipe cards were a different kind of medicine. Her peach preserves, her grandmother's cornbread, a soup she made every November that she called the Standard because she refused to give it a real name. I'd been trying to recreate that soup from memory for 3 years. She'd written every measurement down in her careful, cramped handwriting, with a note at the bottom that said, "Don't tell him where I keep the recipe. He'll stop asking me to make it, and that's half the fun." I laughed. Out loud, alone, in a boat cabin in Vonore, Tennessee. The first real laugh I'd had in days. Then I opened the envelope. My dear Frank, if you're reading this, one of 2 things is true. Either we're old and happy and you finally figured out how to relax on a boat, or I've been gone long enough for you to do something about that trip we always talked about. I'm hoping for the first one. I suspect it might be the second. I found that compartment the first time we looked at the Chris Craft together. You were so focused on the engine I don't think you even saw me crawl under that bench. I thought it might be useful someday. I was right, wasn't I? Here's what I want you to know. Not about the boat, about what comes after the hard part. You have always been better at forgiveness than you think you are. I've watched you forgive things that would have broken other men. I know you're angry right now, probably at someone you love, which is always the worst kind of angry. I know you want to be fair, and I know you want to be right, and I know you're sitting somewhere wondering if those 2 things are going to have to fight each other. Hold people accountable, Frank. That part is not optional. But don't confuse accountability with punishment. Punishment is about making yourself feel better. Accountability is about making sure the truth is told. You've always known the difference. That's why they trusted you with the building for 30 years. Take the river trip. Take someone with you who needs the water as much as you do. You'll know who that is when the time comes. All my love, the standard soup recipe, and one more thing, the first anchorage in the journal, the one I marked with the red tab. That's the one. Don't rush through it. Carol. I folded the letter and held it in both hands for a long time. Brianna knocked softly on the cabin door before she opened it. There's something else, she said. She sat down across from me and put a folder on the table. The title your daughter brought in lists you as sole owner. The signature on the consignment agreement doesn't match the signature on file with the county. We had our notary compare them before we went any further. She paused. Mr. Calloway, we were not able to complete this sale. We stopped the process when the inspection turned up the compartment, and when we ran the paperwork, we stopped it a second time. Is the sale final? I asked. No, sir. Nothing was transferred. The buyer put down a deposit, and he's understandably upset, but no ownership changed hands. The title, I said. It's still mine. It is, she said, but the signature irregularity, that's something your attorney needs to know about, and so does the sheriff's office. Forgery. I knew that word from 30 years of investigation reports. I knew exactly what it meant. I don't want my daughter in prison, I said. Brianna looked at me carefully. That's your decision to make? She said. What's not your decision is what the buyer does with his deposit and what our legal department does with the fraudulent paperwork. Those pieces are already in motion. I drove home slower than I'd driven anywhere in years. The river was still silver through the trees. I pulled into my driveway, went inside, and called an attorney named Gerald Mack, who'd handled Carol's estate and knew my situation as well as anyone could. He listened without interrupting, which is a skill I've always respected. You have a clean legal claim, he said. The title never transferred, the sale was never completed, and there's evidence of document fraud. You'll get the boat back. A pause. The question is what you want to do about Renata. I don't know yet, I said. That's an honest answer, he said. You don't have to decide tonight. The next morning, Renata called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again that afternoon. I listened to both messages after dinner. Her voice in the second one was shaking. She said the Marina had contacted Kevin. She said they'd been told the sale was being reversed. She said she didn't understand what was happening and she needed to talk to me. I called my neighbor Dale instead. He came over with a thermos of coffee, and we sat in the lawn chairs beside the empty boat hitch and watched the light go out of the sky. My son borrowed $4,000 from me 12 years ago and never paid it back, Dale said, after a while. I looked over at him. We didn't speak for 2 years, he said. Then one day I called him and I said, I need you to know that the money isn't what I'm angry about. He said, Then what are you angry about? I said, You didn't ask me. You just took it and told yourself a story about why that was acceptable. Dale poured himself more coffee. He cried. First time I'd heard that since he was a teenager. We were okay after that. But he had to pay the money back first. Every dollar. Non-negotiable. I thought about that for a long time. Over the next week, I learned things through Gerald and through Brianna that I hadn't known. The buyer, a retired Navy man named Harold Sims from Maryville, had been searching for a restored Chris craft for 4 years. When the sale was reversed, he called the Marina furious. Then Brianna apparently told him the full story. I don't know exactly what she said. I know this. Harold Sims called my house on a Wednesday night. I almost didn't answer an unknown number. Mr. Calloway, he said, I'm the man who almost bought your boat. I want to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. I know that, he said. I'm apologizing anyway, for your trouble. A pause. Somebody told me what that boat meant to you, about your wife. Another pause. My wife passed 8 years ago. We were supposed to sail the Great Lakes together. I sat down in my kitchen chair. Water people understand water people, he said. I'm sorry some people don't see what they're sitting on until it's gone. We talked for almost an hour. He'd done 2 tours in Vietnam and spent his career in naval engineering. He had a daughter who disappointed him once badly enough that it took 3 years to come back from. He said he'd come back from it. He said it was worth the 3 years. Before he hung up, he said, Whoever restored that Chris craft loved it. That came through in every fitting and every plank. You did right by her. He meant the boat. He also meant Carol. I think he knew that. Renata came to my house on a Saturday. Alone. No Kevin. She knocked and waited, which she'd never done before. She always just opened the door. I noticed that. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in 2 weeks, which, to be fair, she probably hadn't. She told me the whole story, this time without the rehearsed edges. Kevin had been panicking about the business since July. She'd been trying to carry it quietly without worrying me. She'd told herself the boat was just sitting there. She'd told herself I was getting older and might not use it anyway. She'd told herself a lot of things, and none of them were true, and she knew it, and she'd done it anyway. "You forged my signature," I said. She didn't look away. "I copied it from your insurance card," she said. "Kevin said it was the only way they'd accept the consignment without you present. I told myself it was a technicality. It wasn't." "No," I said. "It wasn't." "I don't know what I was thinking," she said. "I think you were thinking that you were scared," I said, "and that I wasn't paying attention, and that it was easier to ask forgiveness than permission. I think you told yourself I'd understand once it was done." I looked at her. "The problem with that math is, you never gave me the chance to say yes." Her eyes filled up. "I would have helped you," I said. "If you'd come to me and told me the truth about the business and Kevin and the payroll and all of it, I would have sat down with you and figured something out. Not because you asked me to. Because you're my daughter." She put her hands over her face. She didn't make a sound for almost a full minute. "I know," she finally said. "I know that. I'm sorry, Daddy. Here's what I've learned in 68 years of making decisions under pressure. An apology delivered with the face still covered isn't finished yet. The hard part of sorry is when you have to say it looking at the person you hurt." She lowered her hands. She looked at me. She said it again. "I'm sorry." That time I believed her. But believing someone is sorry and deciding what comes next are two different conversations. "You understand that Gerald's already involved," I said. "The Marina's legal department has the paperwork. The title discrepancy is documented. That doesn't disappear because we had this conversation." She nodded. "Kevin needs to understand that the buyer's deposit is a debt," I said. "That man lost time and good faith money because of a decision you two made. That gets repaid. Every dollar." "We know," she said. "The boat comes home," I said. "That one's not a negotiation." "Yes, sir," she said. And she sounded, for a moment, exactly like she had at 12 years old, when she understood she'd crossed a line that couldn't be walked back over. Gerald worked out the final resolution over the following 2 weeks. The Marina formally voided the consignment, returned the documentation to my name, and I drove to Venor on a Thursday morning to retrieve the Chris craft on my trailer. Brianna walked me out to the boat personally. The same mechanic who'd found the compartment was there. He patted the hull the way you'd pat a dog that had been lost and come home. "Good to see her go to the right man," he said. I backed my truck carefully, hitched the trailer, and drove home with Carol's boat behind me and her letter on the passenger seat. That evening, I sat in the captain's chair in my driveway and opened her journal to the first entry marked with the red tab. A bend in the Tennessee River near Decatur, where she'd written, "Wide, slow, watch for herons at dawn. Best light you've ever seen in your life." I thought about what she'd written in the letter. "Take someone with you who needs the water as much as you do." I thought for a long time. Then I called Renata. "Are you and Kevin stable enough right now that you could take a few days off?" I asked. A long pause. "I think so," she said. "Why?" "Because your mother left me detailed instructions for this river trip," I said. "And she wrote that the first anchorage is non-negotiable, and I could use a first mate." Renata was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Daddy," she said, "I don't deserve that." "No," I said, "you don't. But your mother circled this stretch of river in red ink a long time ago, and I'm not going to argue with a woman who hid a letter inside a boat I didn't buy until 2 years after she died." I heard Renata laugh through her tears. It sounded exactly like Carol's laugh, which is either the most painful thing I've ever noticed or the most beautiful. I haven't decided. She came. We put the boat in at a launch near Lenoir City on a Friday morning with the autumn leaves coming off the shoreline trees and the water still and gray-green and cold at the edges. I let her cast off the lines. Carol's hat was on the hook by the cabin door. Our anniversary photograph was on the console. The first night, we anchored at the bend Carol had marked. The herons were there, exactly where she'd said. We watched them move across the water at dusk in that slow, deliberate way, like they had nowhere to be and all of time to get there. Renata made Carol's cornbread from the recipe card. It wasn't quite right. She said she'd try again tomorrow. I told her she'd have time. Somewhere around the second night, sitting on the stern in the dark with the water moving quietly under us, Renata asked me why I hadn't pressed the charges. I thought about what Carol had written. Accountability is about making sure the truth is told. The truth got told, I said. You told it. That was the part that mattered. It might not have, she said, if the boat had sold before the Marina called you. But it didn't, I said. How are you not angrier? She asked. I looked out at the water. A heron was standing somewhere in the dark, perfectly still, waiting. Because I looked at your face at that kitchen table, I said, and I saw the 12-year-old who used to ride to work with me on Saturdays and think it was the greatest adventure there was. I paused. The man who did that to his daughter is not someone I want to be. She put her hand on my arm. I'll spend years earning this back, she said. You'll spend years, I said, and that's fine. That's what years are for. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and sat in the captain's chair in the quiet of the cabin, Carol's letter in my hands, and I watched the light come up over that bend in the Tennessee River. The herons moved through the mist, exactly the way she'd said they would. The water was wide and slow, and the light was, as promised, the best I'd ever seen in my life. You were right, I told her. You were right about everything. The boat rocked gently beneath me. The current moved around the hull in its patient, unhurried way, going exactly where it had always been going, the same direction it had gone long before I got there, and would go long after I left. Some people think a story like this is about the betrayal. Some think it's about the forgiveness. I think Carol had it right from the beginning. It's about the water. It's about the fact that the same current that carried away everything you're afraid of losing is the same one that's been quietly waiting to carry you forward. So, here's what I want to leave with you. If someone in your life has taken something from you, not just property, but trust, or time, or the version of them you thought you knew, you don't have to choose between justice and love. You can demand both. Hold the truth out in the open where it has to be looked at. Let the consequences be real. And then, if the person across the table from you looks up and tells you the truth with their hands in their lap and nothing left to hide behind, you'll know what to do next. You were always going to know. That's why it still hurts. Now tell me something. I'd genuinely like to hear it. Drop a 1, a 2, or a 3 in the comments right now. 1 if you think Renata should have faced criminal charges regardless of the outcome. 2 if you think what happened, the legal process, the debt, the reckoning was consequence enough. 3 if you're still somewhere in the middle, the way I was for a good long while. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. These stories have a way of traveling farther than I expect, and I never stop being glad when they do.